The wedding at Cana, where Jesus performed his first miracle, holds profound significance in the narrative of his life and ministry. It wasn't just an ordinary event. It was the backdrop for the moment when Jesus publicly revealed his divine power, marking the start of his public ministry. The location was Cana, a small town in Galilee, and the setting was a wedding feast. Weddings were not merely social events back then. They were grand occasions that brought communities together, filled with joy, music, feasting, and a sense of unity. In a culture that placed immense value on hospitality, the completion of a wedding feast was a reflection of the family's honor and pride. To run out of wine, as the hosts did during this event, would have been a major social embarrassment. This would not just be an inconvenience, it would have been seen as a serious failure in fulfilling hospitality obligations. In this context, Mary, the mother of Jesus, was likely involved in the wedding preparations, which is why she was among the guests when the problem of the wine arose. Upon realizing the shortage, she turned to Jesus, perhaps expecting him to intervene in some way, though at this moment Jesus had not yet performed any miracles to show his divine authority. Jesus' response to Mary's concern is particularly significant. He replied to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." This may seem like a sharp or distant response, but it reveals something deeper. Jesus was not simply being dismissive. Rather, he was acknowledging that his actions were directed by divine timing. His hour, the time when he would reveal his full identity as the Son of God through his ultimate sacrifice, had not yet arrived. However, his response also indicated his deep awareness of his mission and the timing of the miracles he would perform. Despite the apparent refusal, Mary, demonstrating faith and trust in Jesus, told the servants to do whatever he instructed. This act of faith was a pivotal moment. Though she didn't understand fully, she trusted in her son's ability to help, even when his response seemed to suggest otherwise. As the story unfolds, Jesus asked the servants to fill 6 stone water jars with water. These jars, typically used for Jewish ceremonial washing, were large, about 20 to 30 gallons each. The act of filling these jars with water was not just an arbitrary action, it had symbolic significance. Water in Jewish customs was often associated with purification, cleansing, and preparation for sacred rituals. By choosing these jars, Jesus was signaling that the time had come for a new form of purification, one that would transcend the old traditions and rituals. This miracle wasn't about merely providing wine to the wedding feast. It was about pointing to a deeper spiritual reality. Once the jars were filled, Jesus instructed the servants to draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. When the master tasted the water that had now turned into wine, he was astonished. He marveled at the quality of the wine, commenting that it was customary for hosts to serve the best wine first and reserve the lesser wine for later, once guests had drunk enough. However, in this case, the best wine had been saved for last. The transformation of the water into wine was not just an act of provision. It was a sign of the abundance and quality of God's grace. Jesus wasn't just performing a miracle to save the couple from embarrassment. He was making a statement about the nature of the kingdom of God. The wine was not only a symbol of celebration and joy, but it also pointed to the new covenant Jesus was bringing, one that would be filled with grace, abundance, and joy that surpassed anything that had come before. the miracle at Cana reveals a deeper spiritual message. God's timing and provision are perfect. Jesus' actions demonstrate that he is in control of every detail, even in the most ordinary of situations. His miracle was not just a solution to a problem, it was a declaration of his identity and purpose. The fact that he performed his first miracle at a wedding, a celebration of love and union, is highly symbolic. In the Jewish context, marriage represented the deep covenant relationship between God and his people. By performing his first miracle at a wedding, Jesus was signaling that he was the fulfillment of that covenant. He was the bridegroom, and his church, his people, were his bride. This connection between the wedding feast and the spiritual union between Christ and his followers is significant. The wedding at Cana isn't just a story about a miracle. It's a foreshadowing of the ultimate wedding feast described in the Bible, when Christ will unite with his people in eternal joy and celebration. In this light, the wedding at Cana offers us more than just a glimpse into the compassion and power of Jesus. It offers a window into the larger story of God's plan for redemption and his invitation to his people to join him in the great celebration of his kingdom. What began as a simple act of hospitality at a wedding transformed into the first public sign of Jesus' divine mission. His miracle pointed to the truth that he was the one who would bring about the transformation of hearts and lives, just as he had turned water into wine. This act was the beginning of revealing the deeper spiritual truths that would unfold throughout his ministry and ultimately lead to the ultimate act of love on the cross. The wedding at Cana was a starting point, a moment when the world began to see who Jesus truly was and what he had come to do. When Jesus attended the wedding in Cana, it wasn't just about being a guest at a celebration. His presence there had much deeper significance. Weddings in Jewish culture were not simply social events. They were monumental occasions that symbolized more than the union of two people. They were expressions of community, covenant, and joy. For Jesus to be there, participating in a celebration, highlights a key aspect of his mission. He wasn't distant or detached from the life of the people. He entered into their daily experiences. He didn't come just to be a figurehead of a spiritual movement, separated from the struggles and joys of humanity. By being present at this wedding, he demonstrated that he was fully part of the world he came to save. His participation in the festivities was an important statement. He cared about the lives of ordinary people and their happiness. Jesus wasn't concerned only with the spiritual needs of people, but also with their practical needs and the joy of their hearts. The fact that Jesus was invited to the wedding points to his relationship with the people. He wasn't an outsider, nor was he someone who shunned gatherings or celebrations. He wasn't too holy or too important to engage with others in their everyday moments. He was present because he was part of their lives. And his presence wasn't just a passive one, it was active. By attending the wedding, he entered into the joy of the occasion, but he also engaged in the deeper meaning of the event. His very participation in the wedding was a declaration that he came to restore all aspects of life: joy, love, relationships, and even the community bonds that were often strengthened through such celebrations. Weddings, especially in that time, were more than a union between two individuals. They were public affirmations of commitment, not just between a husband and wife, but between the families and the broader community. A wedding was an event that brought people together, binding them in shared joy and shared responsibility. Jesus' presence in this setting indicated that he came to restore human relationships and bring people together, not just as a family, but as a community that would be united in him. He was showing that his ministry wasn't limited to the individual. It was about creating a new community, a new family of believers who would be bound together through him. Moreover, the wedding is a symbolic setting. In the Old Testament, the covenant between God and his people was often likened to a marriage. God, the bridegroom, and Israel, the bride. This metaphor carried a lot of weight in the Jewish mindset. By choosing a wedding for his first miracle, Jesus was making a powerful statement about the new covenant he was ushering in. He wasn't just fulfilling the role of a healer or teacher. He was fulfilling the role of the true bridegroom. In the coming chapters of the Gospels, Jesus would continually refer to himself in ways that alluded to this intimate covenantal relationship. He would speak of himself as the bridegroom who had come for his bride, the church. His presence at this wedding, therefore, pointed to the greater reality that he was preparing for, a wedding feast that would happen at the end of time, when he would unite with his followers in a perfect and eternal union. This wedding at Cana was a foretaste of the ultimate celebration that awaited those who followed him. By performing the miracle at this wedding, Jesus was revealing a bit of the nature of the kingdom of God. It wasn't just about a future event. It was also about the here and now. His kingdom was breaking into the world, offering joy, celebration, and communion with him. It was a kingdom not of law and judgment, but of grace, love, and abundance. Jesus' choice to attend a wedding also reveals his deep care for human relationships. Weddings are a celebration of love and commitment, and by attending, he affirmed the value of these human bonds. He didn't come to nullify human love or to focus solely on the spiritual realm, but to elevate it. By showing up at this moment of joy, he was honoring the importance of relationships, of family, friends, and communities. His presence at the wedding wasn't about performing a miracle out of obligation or necessity. It was about engaging with the people around him, celebrating their happiness, and bringing his presence into their lives. It wasn't just about offering a solution to a problem. It was about participating in a moment that represented the beauty of life and love. Jesus also used this opportunity to reveal something about his own identity. He didn't come simply to fulfill the expectations of others, but to reveal his mission in his own time and way. His timing was always perfect, even if it didn't align with human expectations. When Mary approached him with the request for help, he responded with the words, "My hour has not yet come." This may have seemed like a refusal, but it was actually a declaration of the divine timing that governed his life and work. Jesus wasn't reacting to situations. He was acting according to the will of the Father. The miracle that followed was not just a reaction to a need, it was a deliberate act that pointed to his divine authority and mission. This event highlights the balance in Jesus' ministry between addressing immediate needs and pointing to the larger, eternal purposes of God. His presence at the wedding wasn't just about solving a practical problem. It was about revealing the nature of the kingdom of God. It was about showing that God is not distant or uninvolved in the mundane aspects of life. but deeply engaged in the joys and struggles of his people. His involvement in this wedding was a reminder that no detail in life is too small for God's attention. Whether it was turning water into wine, healing the sick, or engaging with people in their everyday lives, Jesus showed that his presence mattered in every moment. By being at the wedding, Jesus was also demonstrating that his mission was not just for the elite or the religiously devout, but for everyone. Weddings were public, social events open to all, and his participation in this one was a statement about his inclusive love. He was here to bring joy to all people, to restore what was broken, and to bring hope to those who might be struggling. His presence at the wedding shows that his love and grace are for everyone, regardless of their status or situation. It was a foreshadowing of the gospel message that would reach out to all people, bringing the good news of salvation and restoration. The moment when Jesus turned water into wine at the wedding in Cana is not just a miraculous event. It carries layers of meaning that reveal much about his nature and his mission. When Mary, his mother, informed him that the wine had run out, Jesus initially responded in a way that might seem distant or even indifferent. "My hour has not yet come." This moment shows that Jesus was aware of the divine timeline that he was following, not acting out of human need or expectation. However, his response was not a refusal. It was a statement that his actions would follow God's timing. And yet, despite the divine schedule, he still chose to act in this moment. This is where the miracle begins. Jesus instructed the servants to fill 6 stone water jars, each capable of holding between 20 and 30 gallons of water. These jars weren't just random vessels. They were traditionally used for Jewish purification rituals. Water in these jars was not intended for anything other than religious cleansing. The idea that Jesus would transform this very water into wine is significant. It symbolizes the shift from the old ceremonial laws to the new covenant that he was bringing. By choosing the water used for purification, he was making a powerful statement. The old ways of purification through rituals were being replaced with a new way of spiritual cleansing that would be based on grace, not works. As the servants filled the jars to the brim, there was nothing visibly extraordinary happening. It was simply water being poured into jars, a task that might have seemed insignificant to anyone watching. Yet, when the master of the banquet tasted what was now wine, it wasn't just ordinary wine. It was better than what had been served before. The host was surprised that the best wine had been saved for last. In that moment, the transformation was complete, but what made it truly miraculous wasn't just the fact that the water had become wine, it was the quality of the wine. It was not just any wine, it was exceptional, surpassing anything the guests had tasted so far. The miracle of turning water into wine is not just about meeting a need or performing an act of kindness. It was about demonstrating the abundance and quality of the kingdom of God. The transformation was a revelation of the nature of Jesus' power and the richness of the life he came to offer. He didn't just provide enough, he provided abundantly, and he provided the best. This wasn't just about solving a problem at a wedding. It was a sign that in him there is an overflow of grace, joy, and provision that far surpasses anything people could have imagined. What Jesus did that day wasn't just about the wine itself. It was a sign, a symbol of the greater spiritual transformation that he would bring. The wine was a symbol of joy and celebration, and in this context, it pointed to the joy and the new life that Jesus would bring to those who followed him. Wine in the Bible often represents joy and the blessing of God's presence. In turning the water into wine, Jesus was not only providing for the immediate needs of the guests, but was also pointing to the greater joy that would come through his life, death, and resurrection. The moment of transformation also speaks to the nature of faith. When Mary brought the problem to Jesus, she trusted that he could do something about it. Despite his initial response, she believed he would act, and she told the servants to do whatever he said. This was an act of faith that set the stage for the miracle. The servants too had to trust in Jesus' instructions. There was no explanation given to them, no promise of what would happen, only a simple command: fill the jars with water. Their obedience, without knowing the outcome, was an act of faith in itself. When they drew the water out and took it to the master of the banquet, they were stepping into the unknown, trusting that Jesus had a plan. The miraculous transformation was also a public revelation of Jesus' divine authority. It wasn't a private moment. Jesus could have performed this miracle in secret, but he chose to do it in front of others. The master of the banquet, who was in charge of the wedding celebration, was the one who tasted the wine first. He marveled at the quality, which highlighted the miracle to everyone around. This public display of power revealed to the disciples and others present that Jesus was no ordinary man. He wasn't just a teacher or prophet. He was someone who had the power to change the very fabric of reality. This transformation also points to a deeper spiritual truth, that Jesus came to bring a new order. The old ways of doing things, like the ceremonial purification rituals, were being transformed into something new. The wine, which represented joy and celebration, pointed to the ultimate joy and celebration that would come through Christ's work on the cross. This first miracle was a foretaste of the joy and abundance that would flow from the new covenant he was establishing. Just as the wine was transformed from something ordinary into something extraordinary, so too would people's lives be transformed through Jesus. He came to bring new life, new joy, and a new way of relating to God. The miracle at Cana wasn't just an isolated event. It was a declaration of the nature of Jesus' ministry and a glimpse into what he came to accomplish. It was about more than just performing a miracle for the sake of it. It was about showing the kind of transformation he could bring into the world. Water turned into wine is a simple act on the surface, but in reality, it's a profound sign of the life-changing power of Jesus. The quality of the wine also indicates that with Jesus, there is always more than enough. He doesn't just meet the bare minimum. He exceeds expectations. He brings an abundance that cannot be measured, a joy that cannot be contained. In this moment, Jesus wasn't just providing wine for a wedding feast. He was offering a glimpse into the kingdom of God, a kingdom where abundance, grace, and joy reign. The water that was transformed into wine represented the old way of things, and the wine itself pointed to the new reality that was now unfolding with Jesus. It was a powerful statement about who he was and what he had come to do: transform everything, from the smallest details to the biggest promises, into something far greater than anyone could imagine. The miracle at Cana was just the beginning. and it pointed to a future where the ordinary would be transformed by the extraordinary. Power of God. The miracle of turning water into wine at the wedding in Cana goes beyond a simple demonstration of Jesus' power. It carries profound spiritual meaning that speaks to the essence of his mission and the nature of God's kingdom. At the surface level, the miracle was an answer to a need at a wedding. But in the grand scheme, it was a sign of what Jesus had come to do for humanity: transform the ordinary into the extraordinary, provide joy, and establish a new covenant between God and his people. One of the most striking aspects of the miracle is the way it shifts the focus from the old ways of religious practice to the new covenant Jesus was bringing. The water in the stone jars was used for ceremonial washing, a part of the Jewish purification rituals. These rituals were an essential part of Jewish life, symbolizing cleansing and preparation for approaching God. They represented an old system of purification through works and adherence to the law. But Jesus didn't simply endorse the old system, he replaced it. By turning the water into wine, he was showing that the new way of grace, joy, and transformation had arrived. The wine, associated with celebration, joy, and abundance, was now the symbol of the new covenant that would come through him. The act of using the ceremonial water to create something new pointed directly to the radical shift from law to grace, from ritual purification to spiritual renewal. Jesus' decision to perform this miracle at a wedding is also significant in a deeper spiritual context. In Jewish tradition, marriage was seen as a symbol of the covenant between God and his people. The relationship between the bride and groom was a reflection of God's covenantal love for Israel. By performing his first miracle at a wedding, Jesus was making a statement about his role as the true bridegroom. He wasn't simply a teacher or healer. He was the one who had come to establish an eternal relationship with his people. In the Gospel of John, Jesus refers to himself as the bridegroom, indicating that his mission is about union with his people in a covenant of love and faithfulness. The wedding at Cana foreshadows the ultimate marriage between Christ and the Church, where he will unite with his followers in a perfect eternal relationship. In the miracle, Jesus also reveals the abundance of God's grace. When the wine ran out, the host could have simply brought in more wine, but Jesus did far more than that. He turned water into the best wine, exceeding everyone's expectations. This wasn't just about filling a need. It was about showing that God's provision is overflowing beyond anything human effort can achieve. The best wine was saved for last, which was symbolic of the best that was yet to come. This act of abundance mirrors the nature of God's kingdom, one that doesn't just meet needs, but exceeds them with generosity and joy. In the kingdom of God, there is no lack. The miracles of Jesus consistently point to this truth. God doesn't just provide for our needs in a bare minimum way. He provides in abundance. His grace is not limited, and his blessings overflow. This miracle also speaks to the nature of transformation. Water, a simple and common element, was transformed into something as rich and complex as wine. This speaks to the transformation Jesus brings into the lives of those who follow him. He doesn't just improve lives, he changes them completely from the inside out. Water turning into wine symbolizes the transformation that occurs when we encounter Jesus. The miracle shows that Jesus has the power to take the ordinary, the mundane, and turn it into something extraordinary. In the same way, he takes our lives, no matter how ordinary or broken, and transforms them into something full of purpose, joy, and meaning. The change isn't just superficial, it's deep, lasting, and beautiful, like the wine that was created in place of water. The miracle is also a declaration of Jesus' divine authority. This was his first public miracle, and he chose to perform it in front of others, revealing something of who he was. The disciples who witnessed this miracle were the first to see a glimpse of Jesus' divine power. The transformation of water into wine was not a trick. It was a sign of Jesus' ability to transform all things. It was a direct revelation that he was not merely a teacher or prophet. He was the Son of God, the one who could command creation and bring about radical change. This public display of power was a signal that the time had come for Jesus to begin revealing his true nature to the world. In a broader spiritual sense, the wedding miracle also points to the coming kingdom of God, where joy and celebration will be abundant. Wine is a symbol of celebration, and the best wine at the wedding signifies the joy that will fill the hearts of those who follow Jesus. The kingdom of God is described in the Bible as a feast, a celebration that will bring great joy and fulfillment to all who partake in it. Jesus' first miracle at a wedding points ahead to this ultimate feast, an eternal celebration where the bridegroom, Jesus, will be united with his bride, the church. The miracle is a sign of what is to come when Christ returns to establish his kingdom in fullness. It is a promise of the joy, the abundance, and the transformation that will define that kingdom. Additionally, the miracle serves as an invitation to us. It calls us to participate in the joy and transformation that Jesus offers. Just as the servants at the wedding followed Jesus' instructions, we too are invited to respond in faith. The servants didn't know exactly what would happen when they filled the jars with water, but they obeyed Jesus' instructions. Their obedience led to the miracle. In the same way, our faith and obedience to Jesus invite his transformative power into our lives. This miracle is a reminder that when we trust Jesus and follow his guidance, he brings about change, sometimes in ways we cannot predict, but always for our good. The deeper spiritual meaning of the wedding miracle is vast. It shows that Jesus came to bring something new, something better. He didn't come to simply tweak the old ways of doing things. He came to fulfill them, to bring about a new reality. The wine he created wasn't just for the wedding guests. It was a sign for all of humanity that the kingdom of God had arrived. It was a signal of his power to transform, to provide abundantly, and to bring joy into our lives. In this miracle, we see the heart of the gospel. Jesus came to bring life, joy, transformation, and a new relationship with God. This moment at the wedding in Cana was just the beginning of what would unfold in his life, an invitation to experience the fullness of life that comes from being in relationship with him.